Hi, everyone. Happy New Year's. Technically, it's New Year's Eve, but that means tomorrow is New Year's, and so happy that. But this morning, I don't have a journal today. I'm just going to be chatting about a conversation Marie and I had this morning, right there while we were making coffee. It was still dark out. The day hadn't awoken, and Marie and I were just as slumbery. And so we're making coffee, and we're just complaining about movies in this last year. And then, the year before that and the last several years, the movies that have come out, and the TV shows too, they're just sort of unwatchable for us. I'm not saying they're objectively bad. I'll get to that. But this is subjectively, our median view time is probably 2 minutes for new movies. But then we'll put on something old, 30 years old, 40 years old, and we'll get through them fine. I mean, our median view time of 80s and 90s movies and early 2000s movies is completion. The mode and the median completion. I mean, there's some stuff that's just too corny. It's a bunch of physical humor, and neither of us find that interesting. And so we just can't complete it. But most of those we complete. And so while we were finishing making our coffee, we were just talking about, there's listing movies that, like this one, we couldn't make it through, this one, like big actors and why can't we get through any of these? And then once we had some coffee in us, once we'd finished making the coffee and had our little bit of a methylxanthine fix, we tackled why, of what's the mechanism, how did this happen? Is it that the writers and the directors and the other personnel involved, they've just lost so much intelligence over the last decade that they can no longer make a compelling and coherent movie, they can't tell a story that's coherent? I don't think so. I think the writers, directors, et al., these people are just as smart as they ever were, just as talented as they ever were. They're just pursuing different stuff, different types of entertainment is what they're going after now. And I'll get to why, the reason Marie and I settled on for that. But this isn't everyone does this. NASA does this. I mean, in 1969, some guys, like Michael Jackson on the moon dirt. And from 1969 to 1972, 12 Americans went up there and walked around, did their thing. And then after 1972, whole world over, not one person since has set boot on the moon. Not one. Now, is it because astronauts have just lost so much intelligence and physical training, health, and emotional, wherewithal or whatever to go up there? Or are they just pursuing other goals? Like some other astronaut goal, strikes their fancy. That's all. They're just doing other stuff. It's not like they've lost the... And the same thing you see in music. There are bands like the Bon Jovis of the industry who's like their first song and their last song are just the same beginning to end. Every song is sort of the same thing. But there are other most bands, I would say, change to some extent. And like the famous one, I would say, is like Coldplay. I mean, I was never really into Coldplay. Like back in 2000 when it was all yellow, like that song came out. I'm not going to put it on my mixtapes, but I'm not going to change the radio station either. And so I was never but today I think Coldplay, they're nothing like they once were in terms of the music they're making. I think that's fine. It's totally fine that they get to do that. A band that I really like is Smashing Pumpkins, and contemporary, William Patrick Corgan, he didn't forget. I mean, the music is very different, but he didn't forget what it's like to be 90s Billy. He could still churn out the riffs, and he can still do that. He's just doing others. Or if we're going to go old references, the Beatles did it. Like acid era Beatles, like Lucy in the Sky and I Am the Walrus and Strawberry Fields, they didn't lose the ability to write 2-minute songs about hand holding. They still could have done that. They were just doing other things. And I'm totally pro that. If there's inspiration and you're chasing the heart, that is art. And I'm 100, even if it's like a musical style that I don't care for. It's like, okay, I really liked what you were doing over here. Now that you're doing this thing, I'm still totally, I hold it in a high regard as art if you're, chasing the heart. Alternatively, if what you're doing is surrendering any artistic integrity for money, for pennies, and just chasing the dollar, or whatever currency, that is not art. That's like, I can compliment, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I can compliment like the business acumen or something, but it's like corporate, greed. I mean, as far as art goes, that's like an abomination. And today's writers, directors at all, the people who are composing these movies, I think that's what they're doing. I'm not sure, but I think they're setting art aside for pennies, a ton of pennies, but they're chasing money by selling a product to the scrolling generation. The people, like by scrolling generation, I mean the people whose formative years, their sort of vulnerable, years to define their personality and interests are defined by Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and like YouTube has its shorts and whatever, and it's just sort of one thing after the other. And if that defines your viewing entertainment, that's a huge demographic. If you can sell a product to that demographic, you're going to make a ton of money. And so what would a movie look like if your goal is to sell to that giant demographic? What would it look like? And so that's what Marie and I at this point were like 2 cups of coffee in, and we're coming up with, here's exactly what a movie would look like. And I think it would be a long series of short scenes that have very little to do with the one that came before. In the sense that it's not a storyboard, like a classic storyboard that is optimized for character development and a plot line and where rising and falling action. I don't think it's that. I think it's, all right, here's a scene. Let's say this is scene 12, not like beats, not, we're not even like, Blake Snyder stuff. I mean, just here's scene 11, in the movie. And if somebody, let's say it's 28 seconds long, if somebody watches all 28 seconds, algorithmically, what is the next scene that they would also watch to completion? All right, now here's scene 12. This is the one that's going to maximize viewership through scene 12. Maybe that's 42 seconds. And then here's another scene. It doesn't really follow any coherent narrative or whatever, but here's the next scene that they'll watch to completion according to the algorithm. And then here's scene 14 and 15, all the way to the end of the hour and a half long string of reels that we call a movie. If you watch all of those reels from beginning to end in order, in the algorithmically determined order for maximum viewership, that's a movie, right? So that's the euphemism that we're talking about. And I'm sure they're making a ton of money doing it. I'm sure there's like a killing being made here. Otherwise, if nobody were making money on this, then those like really smart, really talented writers and directors would be making art instead of what they're doing. And while Marie and I are making coffee, we would be complimenting their work, but they're not making it for us because we're not that profitable of a demographic. The profitable demographic is the scrolling generation. So I think that's who modern media is for. But that was our conversation. We moved on with our day after that. That was just our coffee talk for the morning. But that's it for today. I hope you have I hope your New Year's is filled with art. I say that all the time. I hope the coming year is better than the year that came already. There's just the horizon is brighter than, who cares? You get what I'm saying. Bye, everybody. I'll see you next time.